get started, my name is Ashley Mayer, and I'm the career manager with the Alumni Association. And we are super excited to be here tonight with you all with the CMO, Bridget Russo of Shinola. First, before we get started, I just want to say thank you to all of our alumni members of the Alumni Association. Because of you, we are able to have really amazing events like this, so we hope that you really enjoy yourself tonight and continue to support us so that we can have additional events like this in the future. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll kind of give you a little lay of the land. So I'm going to do a little bit of a moderated discussion to start. When you registered, you submitted questions. There are a few that we picked out that we're going to ask Bridget to start with, and then we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. So, Bridget, I could go ahead and read your bio, but I think we'll just have a little bit more of an intimate discussion tonight. And just tell us a little bit about your career journey and kind of how you ended up at Shinola.
Sure. So I'm a native New Yorker. I moved here for Shinola in January of 2013. A lot of people thought I was crazy moving in January to Detroit. Now they're all wondering, should I move to Detroit? I'm like, see, I told you. But I started in PR, so I graduated from NYU with a journalism degree. With this notion that I was going to go into journalism, and like a lot of people who graduate with a journalism degree, ended up, you go one of two ways, marketing or PR, and I ended up in PR. Fast forward, I had an amazing experience on the agency side, working on brands like Diesel, Fiji Water, Absolute Vodka, and really amazing brands. As I was working on Diesel at one of the agencies, they hired me in-house, where I was PR director at Diesel, really at the sort of heyday of the brand. And I was very fortunate, amazing brand, amazing marketing. And right at that time, presence marketing was a big part of brands and the brand experience. So somehow I convinced everybody that that should fall under PR. And that was the beginning of me sort of inching over into the marketing world. From there, I moved on to a brand called Eden. Eden is a brand that's focused on garnering trade in Africa that was started by Bono and his wife, Ali Hewson. And that's where really the storytelling skills that you have in PR translated into that story, which was really a seed to shelf story, and something that, coming from fashion, I never really had. You never talked about your suppliers. In fact, that was top secret, nor was it sexy to talk about suppliers. But here, that was really flipped on its head, and that was the core of the story. So I was the global marketing director there for 7 years. I helped them in the transition of LVMH buying 49% of the company, which was also an interesting experience. I had never been part of that kind of deal, and decided to go on, start my own consultancy called Passion Projects, where I continued to work on, in fact, the last thing I worked on with Eden was a collaboration with Eden and Diesel, where I brought the two brands together using the conservation cotton that came out of an initiative that they were working on in Uganda. In that process, I met Shinola. All they had were some CAD drawings and this idea of building a watch factory in Detroit. I think at this point they had already gotten the space in the College for Creative Studies. And I was so enamored by the whole concept. I'd never been to Detroit, but having grown up in Brooklyn, I just felt like there were a lot of similarities there, even though I'd never been. And certainly I was enamored by the history of Detroit and what a big role it plays in American history. So fast forward, I signed them on as a client. Sure enough, over the months, I started spending a great deal of time on Shinola. Our founder said, you know, you seem to be spending an awful lot of time on us. Why don't you come on board full time? And at that point, moving to Detroit wasn't even part of the conversation. But soon after that, I realized as we started to develop really the storyline of this brand, and we went back and forth. At first it was, is it just Shinola? Is Shinola Detroit just on the watches? And we decided before we launched, you know what? No, we are 100% standing behind Detroit. So Shinola Detroit is on everything. And so at that point, I thought it's a little inauthentic for the head of marketing to be sitting in New York. So I volunteered, and now it's mandatory that everyone is based in Detroit. Our founder's actually originally from Texas, and he goes back and forth. In fact, he's back in town next week. And now, fast forward, I've been there for 5 years. We've been in market with product for 4 years, and it's been a tremendous roller coaster ride. 600 plus employees, 300 plus in Detroit, and over 200 in manufacturing, and 6 categories. So 23 stores and counting.
That's awesome. So kind of going off of that, Shinola is such an iconic brand. And with the changing landscape in marketing and advertising right now, especially with the, I should say, marketing movements changing from social to content to digital marketing, and then also now with automation being a part of that, how has Shinola been able to build their brand to what it is today while being in an era of ever-changing engagement and varying marketing channels?
Well, it's actually ironic that we're probably one of the most analog brands out there. And, you know, watches, turntables, you know, it doesn't really get more analog than that. But we certainly use the technology that's out there, and the social platforms are a perfect place to have this kind of storytelling. It enables you to do it quickly, frequently, and really help build an audience. So before we even launch with product, instead of going the normal route of showing it to the trade press, you know, showing it to retailers, we went direct to the consumer from the beginning. So we actually had a brand website up, and we had, at the time, Twitter and Facebook. Instagram didn't even exist yet. And we started speaking directly to the consumer, telling them what we were doing. We were based in Detroit, talking about some cool DJ that's making music in his basement, to, hey, check out this, you know, new leather color, what do you think? You know, and some people thought that was crazy because they were like, why are you showing stuff that A, they can't buy, and B, is not finished yet? You don't do that. But that was the beginning of helping us build this brand from the ground up directly with the consumer. So I would say the consumer saw this brand before anybody did. Then when we went to retailers, and we were fortunate that we had the relationship, our owner previously started Fossil Watches, so there was a relationship there with retailers like Nordstrom and Neiman's. And so it wasn't so hard to call up and say, hey, I'm Tom, I'm starting this new watch company. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll try out a couple of styles. And he said, no, actually, you have to come to Detroit, and you have to see what we're doing in Detroit. And then they got there, and they're all trying to figure out, how do I get a bike in my watch department? You know, so it really, those early days of the brand were so important, and it was a hand-to-hand combat, as he likes to say. You know, it was a ground game for sure. But certainly storytelling from the very beginning was really important. We have footage that no one's seen of, you know, meetings that were recorded, and from the very beginning there was a camera capturing it all. We worked with a local group in Detroit that pretty much did most of the videos that you see on there. And, you know, we've been very lucky with people recognizing and falling in love with the brand early on. There's cameo stuff in our content. So we did a virtual reality tour with Luke Wilson. We also, at the end of our turntable video, there's a little cameo with Alice Cooper. So yeah, we've had a lot of fun, but it is all embedded in the storytelling. And we're still learning because the landscape keeps changing. You know, Snapchat didn't exist then. Instagram didn't exist then. The different formats didn't exist. So as we grow this brand, we're learning how to storytell and what's relevant. And for us, you know, so far the most effective storytelling has been around the people. You know, the people making the product, the story of making those products. It becomes a little challenging when you're competing on a fashion level. So as we grow the brand and want to build our female audience, talking about how things are made or talking about manufacturing sometimes is challenging, where you're competing with Tiffany's or Cartier or Michael Kors. But with each step that we're learning, but technology plays such a big role in that. And, you know, we're lucky. We work with two outside agencies, one called Partners in Spade that does our sort of overarching brand creative, so the Roll Up Our Sleeves campaign that you see out there now, and then Media Hub, who are part of Mullen Lowe, who help us with our media buying.
Awesome. So that kind of brings me to...
Probably answered like 5 questions.
Oh, you did. You did, because I was going to ask you, with the ever-changing era of this like new engagement and like what that looks like, how are you able to prioritize your consumers? So you kind of touched on that a little bit, but I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more depth about that.
Definitely. Well, in the beginning, we didn't know who our consumer was. The consumer was us, and we really did things that we felt were right, that we felt was lacking in the market. But as we grew and started to delve into the data, there were certain things that came up that we didn't realize that was the consumer that we were attracting. So for instance, we call ourselves casual luxury or approachable luxury, but it really wasn't the luxury consumer that were the early adopters of this brand. It was the people who, buying a Shinola watch, buying a $700 watch was a considered purchase. So more of the person maybe buying Madewell or J. Crew was looking at a Shinola watch, and that was something meaningful. And maybe they waited a couple of paychecks to buy that watch. But when it's such a considered purchase and it's not just like this fashion throwaway thing, you have an inherent brand ambassador in that person. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a plane and someone next to me is wearing a watch, and it's not just the flights going to and from Detroit. And, I'll say, oh, nice watch, and they just launch into the story, oh, have you heard about this brand? And it's amazing to hear that.
So going back to the brand, and thinking about being able to continue with the storytelling and continue with connecting with your consumers while still being able to be cutting edge with the evolving trends when it comes to staying innovative within marketing and advertising as well. What does that mean for marketing for Shinola in the future going forward?
I think for us, we always look at things and don't think, oh, it's the latest technology, we should be using it. And in fact, we're certainly, we don't claim to be the most innovative from a technology standpoint. But ultimately, it all goes back to the consumer experience. And whether that takes shape in an analog form or you're using technology to improve that experience, those are all things that we're looking at. The consumer doesn't care that e-com is a separate business and wholesale. All they care, I'm a Shinola customer. Whether I buy it at Neiman's, whether I buy it in your store, or whether I buy it at e-com, the consumer expects that you know me. And that's something that's really important, especially for a younger consumer. Unlike me, I think it's creepy when I get the retargeting ads or, a brand knows too much about me. I'm like, yeah, I know, I looked at that for like 5 seconds. Why are you emailing me like 100 times now? But in talking and surveying, let's say an under 30, under 25 consumer, they appreciate that. They're like, yeah, that's great. Something that's customized for me, that knows that I like pink and, I live in a city and I work at X. So that's something that we're looking at, because ultimately, certainly we want the brand to always feel personal. And you get that, I think, in our stores with our training, and we do that same training for the sales associates in our retail partners. But you want to be able to have that level of customer experience. Ultimately, everything we do revolves around the customer and the experience of our customer and the experience of our employees. In fact, the experience of our employees is number 1. And the experience of our customers is number 2, because if you don't have happy employees, then you're not going to have happy customers.
I'm glad you brought up the employees, because that brings me to a 2-part question. So, thinking about, we have a lot of alum who are here who have startups and small businesses of their own and who really value making sure that they're able to cultivate or foster really great organizational cultures and working environments. So how would you, or do you have any advice that you would be able to give in terms of what are the important factors in being able to cultivate a great organizational culture, and what part does a CMO play in that?
I think definitely, as a CMO, you're partnering with the rest of the organization. So your team is a facilitator really you're a service. You're a service to the retail environment, you're a service to the e-com team, you're a service to the wholesale team. And we're also a service to the brand. So across all those channels, we need to make sure that we're consistent and that we're servicing the brand as best possible. I think from a company culture standpoint, we, for instance, don't have offices. No one, even our founder, does not have an office. There's an open door policy. Ideas can come from anywhere and it's encouraged. And making sure that your employees are informed. Maybe it's not their area and you may think, well, it doesn't matter if they know that. But when they understand the totality of the business and what we're driving towards, make sure it's clear what the goals are. And even within the organization, you certainly want personal goals. You want goals for your team, but you also need to understand what are the company goals, what are we trying to reach, and how can I impact that in a positive way. But having clear, defined goals so everyone's on the same page, because often, and I've in the past worked for a brand where retail thinks one thing, PR thinks another, and marketing thinks another, and all three are doing things very differently.
So that kind of brings me to a break in in my questions, because I want to be able to open up the floor and give you all enough time to ask Bridget some questions of your own. So hopefully you have been thinking in the 20 minutes that we've been talking already. I know time is flying and speeding up, but are there any questions that we have out in the audience that you'd like to ask Bridget at this point? Sure.
Oh, sorry.
So you mentioned right at the beginning that you have a brand that you debated whether or not attaching the name Detroit to Shinola. It wasn't separate, it was the same. Now I'm sure you look back on that decision and say that was genius. That was the best decision we made. But as the story around Detroit evolves and as your brand evolves, what is your key sort of litmus test for are we doing well by the city, and is the city still a good thing for us to be putting attached to our brand?
I think there's an authenticity to it that, we weren't trying to be opportunistic by putting the name Detroit in our brand. We're committed here. We're walking our talk. We're creating those jobs. We're not going to walk away from Detroit if, I don't know, Tallahassee becomes, popular. That would be really long and weird and from a branding standpoint. But it is challenging when you start to go outside of Detroit. So we were certainly surprised and happy to see that this story resonated outside of Michigan and even outside of the United States. But we're very careful to make sure that as we're going to other markets, and everybody has city pride, right? Portland has, extreme city pride. Brooklyn does, et cetera. That we find ways to link to that local community, whether it's by doing events or supporting local charities. There are adjacencies to things that we're doing overall with this brand that, for us, it just happens to be based here. We'll continue to expand what we're doing here, but we're also looking at Chicago, for instance, to expand our manufacturing, and the Bronx for our jewelry manufacturing. So this will always be our core and be part of our DNA. But we always view Shinola as a global brand, and why not have Detroit on a global platform? It deserves that. It is a major city in America, and despite the bankruptcy, there is so much that happens here, so much creativity that comes from here, both now and in the past. And we're really about holding hands with Detroit and the future of Detroit and putting that on a global stage.
Yep, right there in the back.
So kind of alluded to that, this brand has become very global, and very proud when we see it in Times Square. And as I've left this country, how do you manage the brand and not let it become an entity on its own? How do you kind of, for lack of a better term, control the story?
We definitely control the story, and I think that has to goes back to the consistency. It also goes back to making sure your North Star doesn't switch too much, So if it's about workforce development and job creation, then that's what it's about. Certainly, that's sort of the core of our mission, and it's been a big part of our branding. But where it has been challenging is when you're trying to sell a $700 watch or a $950 bag. And we're still figuring that out. Like, what does this look like to a Vogue magazine reader, or I don't know, no one reads magazines anymore, but, you know, to a Man Repeller, you know, follower. So, you know, we're definitely still figuring that out. I think there's a place. I think certainly we know now that the brand has a lot of fans in the entrepreneurial community. It has a lot of fans within the women's empowerment community. So those are things that we can lean into because they're at the core of our brand. You know, our founder doesn't have a traditional story. He's self-made. No one handed him his success. He could be on a beach in Hawaii right now, but he decided to invest his money in starting this in Detroit, and he is very passionate about creating jobs, and so as a result, so are we. But ultimately, what is that balance, right? Because, you know, we have this amazing campaign in Times Square, roll up your sleeves. You got Mark Ruffalo posting it on Instagram, and it's amazing. But that doesn't necessarily always translate in sales, especially when you're at our price point. So it's all about a balance, but we're not going to walk away from that. So as we start to develop, and we're in the process of doing that, what is our women's messaging? What is our, when we're in a fashion space, what do we sound like? What do we look like without looking like everybody else and sounding like everybody else? But ultimately, you know, again, it's driven by, of course, our North Star, but also our consumer. Our consumer is, you know, they're active, they're culturally aware, they are, you know, they're professionals, they're looking to excel in whatever they're in, whether it be sports, whether it be, you know, in the boardroom. So those are all things that really, I think, are pillars of the brand.
Yes, Joe.
So when you're crafting your marketing campaigns, what would you say is the key element in actually getting people to care about the story that you're telling?
That's a really good question. I think we've been very timely. We've been lucky in the sense of we came to Detroit, we were part of that rebirth of Detroit storyline. We didn't create that storyline. We just came at a time, and we had no idea. Like, we had no idea the bankruptcy. We had no idea sort of the trajectory. But what we did do is we believed in the future of Detroit. And so I think the timing was right in terms of the launch, and then sort of how we have grown and are growing together with Detroit, I think, is a big part of it. I think there's just a natural fact that jobs is an important issue, continues to be an important issue. It was last year during the campaign, and certainly continues to be now. Even so the numbers are better, there's still people out there who are looking for quality jobs. There's the other part of it where, and it's not talked about as much, there's a lot of these kinds of manufacturing jobs out there, but not a lot of people who want to take them because they have a negative notion of what that job looks like. Because historically, maybe it hasn't been the best job. But in fact, depending on the category, you can make 6 figures if you're in construction or, you know. So there are all these skilled labor jobs that no one's providing the skill. There's a lot of jobs out there, but not enough people to fill them that have the skill. We provide training, but not every company out there is set up to do that. So I think it's a relevant storyline. Will we walk away from it when, you know, things move to something else? No, this is part of our story and something that we're passionate about. But I think it's about quality job is about quality of life, and it's, you know, I think it's part of the American spirit that is certainly something that we've built this brand on.
Yes.
So, Shinola is a global brand. I think you said 23 stores now. So going from the global scope, but maybe focusing more locally, can you talk about, of those 23 stores, how the decision was made to put one right here in Ann Arbor on, you know, the corner of Liberty and Main, as opposed to, you know, another big city somewhere around the world?
We're definitely getting more strategic with our store locations. In the beginning, it was really, again, where it just felt right. We found the great this corner location's amazing. So some of those earlier stores, this one being one of them, it was just based on a gut feeling that was the right place to be, but now it's a combination. We look at our e-com sales, we look at our wholesale sales, and then now that we have a persona or a customer profile that we're going after, we kind of marry up all the dots and see where they're located. We recently started opening in malls. At first I was a little concerned because I thought, oh, does a mall consumer know this brand? You know, we still are a growing brand, a brand that, you know, our last survey, 83% of the US population doesn't know. But so far we've seen positive results. So we're in Boston, in Prudential Center, we're in King of Prussia in Philly, at the Grove in LA, and that's a great sign.
Yes, right there.
I have a question about influencer marketing. How important is that to your marketing mix, or what places that have? What role do you see them playing? How do you identify them, and then how do you judge the return on investment?
Very good question. I know right now that seems to be the hot topic, right? It moved from programmatic and now it's all about micro-influencers. I think all of it has a place and none of it's a silver bullet. I definitely prefer working with micro-influencers just because it seems a bit more authentic. As far as measurement, for us it's always exposure to a new audience, how many new people do we bring into the brand, and also a content generator. Even so we have a pretty solid in-house team and some agency partners to create content, it's still not enough. So to have people take on Shinola through their lens, whether it be through an influencer or a media partner. In fact, some of the work we'll be doing this holiday, some of the partners we're working with, Girl Gaze being one of them, Man Repeller, you'll see some of that where they're creating content on our behalf. But I think micro-influencers are an important piece of a marketing plan, and also a pretty cost-effective one. I mean, there are some brands that built their whole company working with hundreds of influencers. What's the name of that watch brand? Daniel Wellington, I think. They have a huge following. I mean, they're lucky. They just have one watch and it's that one style and they're just doing different colors. But basically, they drove their success through influencers, but hundreds of them. So yeah, it's definitely important. But again, it's all part of a mix.
Any other questions? There was someone in the back that had a question. No? Sure, yeah.
So I have a question. You spoke to, moving into the space to compete with these iconic brands. Cartier, Tiffany, they have this historic equity. You also spoke to the fact that you're trying to drive penetration and awareness. So what's your vision for really driving that equity without losing the differentiation and that consistency that you spoke to of being within Detroit and creating jobs? So how do you see yourselves moving into that space?
Well, I think because we're really steeped in products with purpose, and that younger consumer cares about that. They care about where their products are made and who's making them and how it's made. So I think that's inherent in the brand, and I think for this, new crop of consumers, it's important. Luxury is also moving in a different direction. It's not so logo-driven. Really meaning is the new luxury. People want their brands to mean something. Does that mean people are going to stop buying the uber luxury brands? Absolutely not. Gucci wouldn't be as successful as it is, especially right now. They're not saving the world. They're not trying to or claim to, but they're doing very well. And they're doing well with the millennial audience. So it's not to say that those brands are going to go away, but I think there's an increased interest and value placed on brands that are having a positive impact on their community. But ultimately, you have to have great product. You are competing. Someone's not going to spend that kind of money on something if it doesn't look good or if it falls apart. So really, that's quality and design is primary, and it's the cherry on top, the social aspect of the brand. Look at Warby Parker. I mean, they hardly talk about one for one. People buy it because it's great value, right? It's a great price point for a fashion frame, and it's made pretty decent.
Okay, we'll go with you, and then we'll go with you.
So besides the watch, obviously, what is the one thing you want a consumer to walk away with at the end of their experience with Shinola?
Oh, that's a great question. What do I want them to walk away from? I really want them to walk away with a strong, positive feeling of their Shinola experience, and whether they don't buy a thing. People come in our stores and they're asked if they want a coffee or a Shinola cola And doesn't matter if they have any intention of buying something, but they walk away with a good feeling of, I enjoyed that. I like that brand. It's a nice brand. I think the day and age of these fashion brands or even publications that are standoffish, we dictate to you what you wear, those days are gone. It's about making people feel included, both, again, your employees and your customers.
So this probably reveals how closely I follow the Shinola brand, but I received a Snapchat today from a friend. She's in the city, and the photo was of the Shinola Hotel, and I really got caught off guard by that. I was not expecting it. So I guess I was just wondering your take on how that fits into the overall brand of how, really from the beginning and how it really fits into where the brand has gone.
I think for us, and we have never called ourselves a lifestyle brand, and I think we're much more than that, but I think we never saw ourselves as just a watch brand. And the idea really came quite spontaneously. The founder and I were in a taxi. This is before I moved to Detroit, and I love hotels, and I've traveled a lot in my lifetime, and I thought, you know what Detroit's missing? A boutique hotel. Like, there isn't one. And back then, there really wasn't one. There was the Westin, and that's it. And I love the Westin. I, in fact, lived there before I found a place to live. And he's like, what if Shinola did a hotel? I'm like, that would be so cool. And then he did it. He found the right partners, and he did it. And the vision really is that you'll walk into a Shinola hotel room, and you can buy the lamp, buy the bed, buy the sheets if you want. That's not going to happen straight out the gate. But really, that's the intention. But Shinola as a brand is an experiential brand. So for us, it made total sense. Now there's a lot more competitors in the space. There's Foundation Hotel and the, what's it called? The one that's the Siren Hotel that's going in the Wertzler building. But that's good. That shows that, there's certainly room for more than one hotel. But again, it all goes back to that experience. So that experience, that warm experience that you get in the store will be the same in the hotel. I'm not involved in all of the conversations around the hotel, but in earlier conversations, Tom, our founder, was like, I don't want this to be a pretentious hotel. I don't want this to be a hotel where we turn people away if they want to come and get a burger. And I want there to be a burger on the menu without fancy shit on it, So, that's really important for us, definitely.
Yeah, there's a question all the way in the back.
It's challenging. It's very hard. I'm not going to lie. It is very hard because the team doesn't grow exponentially and the budget doesn't grow exponentially. So, with that, you certainly have categories who are fighting for real estate, whether it be on social or on the website or in marketing and advertising. So it's hard. And we definitely have to put, some goals in place to say, hey, watches is this percentage of our business. We want it to be X, so they get X percentage of the resource. Ultimately, I want to drive a brand, right? Because there's loads of people who don't know this brand. What's nice about the category is it allows people to come into the brand through different windows. So if you're just coming into the brand and you're buying that notebook, or if you're buying a watch or you're buying a bicycle, I have loads of people out there who I meet, and they're like, oh, I thought you were a bicycle brand. And so it's like, yeah, we are. We're a bicycle brand, we're a watch brand, but ultimately the idea is that Shinola stands for quality and authenticity, and for positive social impact. And that can be applied to jewelry, can apply to a turntable, but the most important thing is the quality. And if we fall short on that, then we're falling short on ourselves and on the customer. but it's challenging. I can't say it's easy, and we moan and groan every time a category is added, but it's also super cool too. That's a beautiful turntable.
Yes, question up there.
For me, I'm a big fan of agency experience. I think it's such an amazing boot camp because you get to work on a variety of accounts. You get to learn real quick what you like working on and what you don't. And also you get to learn how to manage different stakeholders, whether that be on the client side or internally with your team who you're reporting to. So you learn very quickly how to operate in that environment. And it's so important. You know, some people stay agency side their entire careers. Some people decide when they're sort of at a certain point and they're very clear on where they want to go, they go in-house. And at that point, they're pretty clear on what category they want to go to. A lot of them go to their clients, like I did at Diesel. They ended up hiring me in-house, and that happens. But I'm a big fan of agency experience. The agency landscape is changing. So I would say look at the work that you admire out there, see who's doing it, and knock on their door.
Are there, oh, yep, question back there.
You had mentioned, like, the difficulty of talking to women about manufacturing, and, like, women specifically in some of your marketing. And I'm curious why, like, what are you coming to women with, or what are you trying to have women come to you with as expectation, as, like, a separate group that you're looking at?
So I think for us, we're finding just through simple testing that when we lead with a manufacturing message, it doesn't convert as well when we lead with beautiful product and let her discover this story. It doesn't mean that we never tell her about the manufacturing, but maybe it's the second or the third thing, but it's not what we lead with. So it's not to say that women don't care about manufacturing or women don't care about jobs. Absolutely we do. But it's all about the hierarchy of that messaging and what are you leading with. We found, at least in our testing with different content, that in order to convert or even keep her on the site, you have to lead with beautiful product, a little bit of a design story, and then you get into that job creation.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I just wanted to thank you all for coming. For those of you who are following us through the live stream, thank you for joining us. We are going to allow Bridget to mingle and chat with you all for the next about an hour or so.
We got to get her a new watch.
Yes. Well, you know what? I mean, there's a watch up there that I have my eye on. It's rose gold. So
I forgot. Sorry, we didn't make the
Yeah.
announcement.
Yeah.
So if you guys would like to shop, as a thank you for coming out and supporting us, I'd like to extend a 20% discount tonight for anything you purchase. So, thank you.
So now I will take my paycheck that I just received and go and buy a new watch. I'll put my Fitbit on the other one because I do need my steps. But but I will look at that definitely. But yes, help yourselves to some additional food and drinks and mix and mingle. And again, thank you for coming out.
Thank you.